Okay, so hi everybody and welcome to the first of our series of Winter Readiness webinars. My name's John Franklin, I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at IATA, and we're now running both in the WebEx and hopefully we've got some people also joined through the live stream in YouTube as well. So just to kind of start introducing what we're going to do, first of all, in terms of our hosts here in the studio, my name's John Franklin, as I said, Head of Safety Promotion here at IATA. I'm joined by...
What's good? I'm a Seasonal Readiness Manager at EasyJet.
Thanks for joining me. It's great to have actual real people in the studio here in Cologne. So huge thanks to Laura for coming all the way over and joining us in person here. So just to give you a quick idea of what we're going to do over the next 2 days. So first of all, today we're going to do sort of a winter readiness overview now for the next 90 minutes or so. Tomorrow morning, we have another session on de-icing between 10 and 11:30, all times of Central European time. And then in the afternoon, we're going to do a dedicated session on snow clearance. So they're the different sessions. If you want to register for any other session, I'll just move that a little bit closer. If you want to register for any of the other sessions and you haven't already, hopefully you found our Winter Readiness event page on the IATA website here, and you can register for the other sessions at the bottom here and join those sessions as you need. If you can't join them, we will be recording the sessions and putting them either on the Together for Safety YouTube channel, through links on the event page, or also on the AirOps community site. So if you need them, there's lots of places to get them. So just to get into a few quick logistics before we start, and actually just give me a second, I can start now also the Slido. So if you go to the bottom right hand corner of the screen, assuming you're joining us on the YouTube, sorry, you're joining us in the WebEx, then you should be able to find the Slido in the bottom right hand corner under apps, and then in that you will see either both polls, and we have one poll I was going to start a little bit later on, or you can type your questions, upvote other people's questions. And I would say please ask as many questions when we get into the discussion later that you have for us and in the studio and the panelists. Also look and see if the question's been asked already and upvote other people's questions. There's nothing worse than 10 questions on the same subject all at the bottom of the pile because nobody upvoted them. We will of course look at them intelligently and see that as much as we can, but you know, it's always good to upvote them as much as possible. If you want to, you can go onto a web browser or your mobile, your handy, and go to Slido itself, either through the Slido app or sli.do, and use hashtag winter 2023, and then that code there, Tango Kilo Lima Alpha Whiskey Papa, and use that to get in and do it separately. Or if you happen to be joining us through the YouTube live stream, we'll also be monitoring the live stream comments that come into the YouTube, and if needs be, I'll transfer comments across that way as well. So there's lots of opportunities there. The presentations and the recordings, as I say, will be on that event page probably Monday or Tuesday next week, by the time we've edited everything down and checked that everybody's happy for the presentations. Also, we'll create an article on the community site, share that, and also on the YouTube for Together for Safety as well. So lots of opportunities there, and lots of you'll get all the material, so no need to take notes or pictures and whatever. In terms of the agenda for today, so what I'm going to do is just quickly run through this agenda you see here, and I'll get the different panelists to introduce themselves as we go through. So Laura and I, you've met. Then we're going to start with an update from IATA. So Dragos, do you want to, if I just stop sharing my screen now so you can see our panelists?
Good afternoon, Dragos Montano, IATA Safety Flight Operations Europe.
Great, thanks for joining us, Dragos. And then for the IATA Winter Readiness, the second side, we've got Gabriel. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Good morning from Montreal. Good afternoon to you, or wherever you are. I'm the head of safety here in IATA. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us across there in Montreal. And then from an authority side of things, we have Jonathan. Jonathan, can you introduce yourself next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Heavey. I'm the Ground Operations Inspector here in the Irish Aviation Authority, and formerly with Ryanair and Ground Operations for 21 years.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And then in terms of standards and ASAE work, we've got Jerry from Kilfrost. Jerry, can you introduce yourself next?
Hello to everyone. Yes, Jerry Lewis, Chief Technical Officer at Kilfrost. In the SAE G12 group, I am the Fluid Co-Chair, very much involved in the writing and updating of the global de-icing standards, and generally helpful.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And then we'll all join the discussion, but we've also got then Laura from EasyJet. Christian, can you introduce yourself next?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Christian Zajek. I'm the nominated person ground operations for Ryanair and Malta Air.
Fantastic. Great you could join us. And then finally, Greg, can you introduce yourself as well?
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Dabek, Head of de-icing operations for Menzies Aviation for Europe, also DR70 for Europe. I've been with the in de-icing world for the last 17 years, so I'm glad to be here with you. Thanks.
Fantastic, and thanks to all the panelists for joining us. As you can see from the people we've got, we really have kind of a dream team here of people from organisations who cover this topic, as a kind of core part of their routine operations. So hopefully you'll find it really interesting, and their thoughts on this topic particularly insightful and useful for the whole of us, whole community, as we move forward this winter. So I'm just going to share the screen again and just give you a quick kind of IATA introduction to not so much the winter ops side, but more kind of the general kind of safety side. And this will be kind of help us structure the discussion that we have going forward. So one of the big things we've been promoting from our summer campaign, but then also, as going through the year, is this kind of concept of no compromise on safety. And it, kind of a cliche that, we talk about safety being our #1 priority, but there's a challenging operational and business reality for the industry, and the more open we can be about these conversations and the challenges that we face, the more, hopefully the better we understand what those challenges between the interfaces are, and hopefully talk about them and manage them and solve them on an operational level as best we can. So particularly in these campaigns, we use this concept of being ready, resilient and responsive, and particularly in the summer, and then particularly as you come through to certain parts of the winter, there are lots of challenges that we don't necessarily have to deal with as part of our kind of steady state, kind of normal operations outside these kind of sudden new things. It's interesting. It's something actually Laura joined me on a podcast we did a few months ago now, about this idea of having a seasonal mindset and kind of thinking about, as any organization, you have your routine operation, but then you have the summer peaks, and you have, in fact we were talking about this idea of when the summer stops, then you have PRMs and lithium batteries and all of these things. And maybe can you say a little bit about how the challenges you have, just in terms of region, a seasonal mindset?
Definitely. So I guess the main part of my role was to kind of create that seasonal calendar, that rhythm that we see every year, where we see the same risks cropping up at certain times of the year. And John and I had a conversation, and the winter operation is obviously one of the key seasonal risks that come around, but there are certain nuances as well, slightly sort of less prominent risks that still crop up. So we have storm season, where we see sort of high winds beginning of the year, particularly in Europe. Then we see PRM season after the school holidays have generally finished, where we see a risk of increased incidents with EMAs or PRM passenger handling. So it's really interesting that when you actually look at your trends and your risk, you have this seasonality about them. And it's something I think that when we spoke about it, they're the kind of things that help you to become as ready as possible. So what risks are coming, so how when you need to start dealing with them in your sort of seasonal calendar. And that's why we're here today, I guess. You know, it may be summer and a very busy summer for most of us, but now is the time to start talking about the winter.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit where particularly us being here today is about this ready bit, is this concept of, you know, looking ahead to the winter season. You know, are we going to have enough competent people, the resources we need, all the things set up to ensure when the winter part of the operation start, we have safe and effective operations. And I'm going to just kind of finish my little bit by talking a little bit about this safety map, and we're going to use this particularly in the discussion later to look at, you know, how can we, you know, it's one thing just to talk about safety stuff, but we realize the more we break it down into these basic building blocks, the easier it is to have those conversations. So we talk about mindset as an industry, as an organization, you know, as organizations, you know, how do we can talk about this idea of define and live the values that create the trust to have these kinds of conversations, again, as an industry or as organizations, with organizations together at a particular airport, perhaps, or, you know, who operate together, you know, suppliers, etc. And then the people part, ultimately having enough competent people who are operationally ready and fit for duty. What does that mean, and how does that particularly relate then to our winter activities? Similarly, about resources, you know, we talk traditionally about resources in terms of the aircraft, but it's, you know, there are lots of resources and equipment and you know, all the fluids and all the other things that enable effective winter operations, and we'll talk a bit about that later. Similarly, lots of things, obviously from an EASA perspective, lots of rules to follow, and the more we can help people understand what those rules are, the better. Similarly, do we know what our winter risks are, and how can we be prepared to mitigate them effectively? And the more we can share information on that, that works. And then a lot of this is learning in general. It's, you know, what have the panelists and the wider industry learned from last year and previous years that we can then apply now to how we prepare ourselves for the next months ahead, so that when, you know, when the first bad weather comes, we're ready to go, and all of these kinds of things. So that's kind of the main thrust of what we're going to do in terms of the discussion today. So at that point, I'll hand over to Dragos and let you talk through a bit about what you've seen from an IATA perspective.
Yes, it will be Gabriel first, and
yes, sorry.
share his screen now.
Thank you. Let me try that. And
hopefully the screen sharing works.
Fingers. Can you see my screen now?
You can. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
Works now.
So I'll be, my part is very brief. I'm just going to introduce you to our accident database, which is now, since the 59th edition of our annual safety report, now public, and where you can go and find information about this particular topic related to accident data, but about any topic that you want. So if you go to IATA.org and then head to programs and safety, you land in our main page. And if you scroll a little bit down, here you have our interactive safety report. So our usual annual 300 report we've turned into a complete website that we update twice a year. We're about to update it at the end of August with the mid-year numbers. And you can find our executive summary, the interactive part with all the data going back to 2005, our recommendations to prevent accidents and strategies, and all the definitions and things about our report, how it's put together. So if we go to the interactive part, sorry, give me a second, and it opens this page. You have to accept here our terms and conditions, and then here at the bottom you can enlarge the screen. And you have different tabs on the top that you can interact with depending on what you want to see. So I'm going to go straight to threat error management. And what we've done here is going back to 2005, we have all our database of accidents, 1,365 commercial aviation schedule accidents. I'm going to turn the labels on. Here are by categories, but then for every accident, we do the threat error management classification. So we have the underside aircraft states, the countermeasures, errors, latent conditions, and threats that have been a contributing factor to these accidents. So as you can see, meteorology, what we're here to talk to you about, has played a factor in 20.95% of all accidents. And then this is subdivided by these subcategories here we have thunderstorms, poor visibility, wind, shear gust, and icing conditions. So for example, icing conditions are 2%, hail less than 0.3%. And this is for the whole world for this time period. But then you, for example, can go here and say, well, we're talking mostly to Europe this afternoon, so let's speak just Europe. And you see how this changes. Now it went up to 25%. Icing went a little bit up to 2.75. And you can see, because it repopulates everything, in Europe, if we click on further, just accidents where meteorology played a factor, you can see what type of accidents we have. So in 34% of hard landings, 30% of runway excursions, 12% of tail strikes had something to do with meteorology. And these were the underside aircraft states, countermeasures, and so on. So if we clear filters, and I show you a different way to do this, what about unnecessary weather penetration? So that accounts for 5.35% of all accidents in our database. Again, I can go to the region of operator, Europe, and here it goes down, 2.75. So that is good news for Europe. If I go again to the whole world, another way to see is how have these contributed to fatal versus non-fatal accidents. And you'll see that both actually go up. Unnecessary weather penetration goes to 12%, meteorology goes up to 31%. So we know that when it comes to how much they contribute to fatal versus non-fatal accidents, these categories are more present in fatal accidents than in non-fatal accidents. And we can again see what type of accidents, and then loss of control becomes the biggest one with 42%. So in 42% of loss of control accidents, 25% of them had something to do with 12% with unnecessary weather penetration, and meteorology played a role in 31% of them. So you can come here, you can play with the data, you can go by end state, and select multiple selections, or one region of operator. We can do by engine type. Is there a difference between jets or turboprops? You can do by flight phase, for example. If you're just interested on the takeoff, you will come here and select takeoff, and it will repopulate everything and show you that in takeoff how things change. That's what I wanted to show you today. This is public. This is updated twice a year. Please use it. It's there for you, for the safety experts around the world. And if you find something interesting, some correlation, or if you have any questions, please do come back to us. Let us know. We're always happy to hear from you, or if you have any ideas on how we could improve this. Thank you very much, and over to you, Dragos.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And I'm going to share my screen now, since another way, in fact, to look at information that is available is basically to look at what happens, in fact, in winter. And when in fact John advertised this event, we felt quite excited to work with this, since it was very much aligned to our mindset in terms of preparing the industry for what is to come. And really, this mindset is not something that we invented at aviation. It's really if you want, the traditional wisdom that in summer you build your sled, and in winter you build your cart for the next season. So preparation really plays a very important role in making sure your operations will go as planned. And looking at what's happening in winter, and we have the beauty of big data now to help us. And we have just looked in our incident data exchange, the big database of air safety reports, and we try to see what's happening in winter. And you see over there, example, aircraft anti or de-icing. It is really the event that gets kind of reported a lot. And we decided just in 2 slides to focus a little bit on this one. And the graph, I think, shows the seasonality. We already discussed about it. It's obvious that when winter comes, winter events get reported. And then we looked at the period starting from 2021 to let's say now. You see over there COVID at the beginning of the season 2020, 2021, not so many operations. But then if you look at, let's say, full seasons like 2020, 2021 to 2022 in the middle and the beginning of this year, you see that issues with de-icing get reported by crews, and you see over there also rates. The rates are expressed to 10,000 flights, and you can even see a little bit of an increase in the rate of reporting of de-icing events from, let's say, the first season 0.52, then the next one 0.65, 0.78. That can have many explanations. It can deal with the reporting culture. It can deal, in fact, with the importance of the issue. But it's something to further discuss and analyze and see if matches with the other, let's say, with other analysis. And without spoiling the very important and interesting webinar that you're going to see tomorrow, especially regarding de-icing, when we have looked in this country 100 reports, what in fact gets reported by the crews, what do we have there? Well, quite a lot of issues, I think, that will be tackled in the next hours. Is basically improper or inadequate de-icing. A lot of communication issues, and we know that in the de-icing operation, communication plays a part. There are stakeholders that are being involved. There is the crew, there is sometimes maintenance, then there is the ground handler over there. Issues with phraseology, issues with English language, issues with having a common understanding, basically, of the concepts. Then improper procedures used. In certain places, these are being reported that you have some standards, you have your de-icing manual, but then, of course, the service that gets in fact returned to you from the ground handler sometimes differs from what is basically written and what the crews are expected. Quite interesting one, different interpretation of contamination, and this is, I think, a good topic to be discussed between pilots, between maintenance engineers, between ground handlers. Sometimes there are quite different understandings of what contamination means, and then maybe an issue for training and for visualizing if a certain amount of snow or means really contamination, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. The clean aircraft concept, how is it really implemented in all these organizations' interpretation? Sometimes incomplete de-icing, so basically some of the areas of the aircraft that are still, in fact, having some snow or deposits even after the operations are being performed. Difficulties in performing final check, I think everybody can relate to it, that in certain locations and in certain setups for de-icing, it is difficult, in fact, for the final check to be performed. Sometimes we even see reports of the equipment contact with the aircraft. The de-icing trucks and the de-icing equipment need to be close to the aircraft to perform this task. So these are things that sometimes unfortunately happen, leading to, let's say, other types of events of aircraft damage. And then de-icing, fluid contamination and spill. So basically the fluid getting into the APU inlet, getting sometimes even into the doors inside of the aircraft, and then some other issues. But this is just at a high level what we are seeing in terms of when we are looking in a big database of ASRs. When we try to find winter events, most of them are relating to de-icing. And just to understand what is being reported, most of these events have this as a main route. That would be our pitch at the beginning. John, back to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dragos. It's great to kind of have that scene setting. And actually, there are a couple of questions we got in the Slido that maybe we could address just now anyway. So we got one, probably the first one is maybe one for Gabriel or maybe either of you, asking, do you have a filter for business aviation accidents and occurrences?
Thank you. Very quickly. So what we always keep track of is commercial aviation schedule, over 5,700 kilos. So we do not have, we have a filter for cargo, for passenger, for type of operation, even for sometimes single aisle, double aisles, things like that. But we don't keep track of business aviation accidents. For that, I recommend you go to Flight Safety Foundation. Their Aviation Safety Network has a very similar kind of tool where you can go and you can see executive jets and other types of aviation. I think they also have general aviation and other things. Good question. Thank you.
And certainly, maybe just to add, so from an EASA perspective, and actually this helps perhaps to answer the question from Nicholas about whether EASA has a similar kind of database out of SMS reports. So we don't have an online tool publicly available like that at this stage. The data is collected, obviously, everything that gets sent to the national authorities via MORs. And actually next week, we'll launch EASA's annual safety review that will provide summaries of the data at a kind of broad annual level, what's happening, the top accident categories, safety issues, etc. And in that, there's a dedicated business aviation section, although because it looks at accidents and serious incidents, European level, the numbers are pretty small, so it doesn't necessarily tell us a whole amount in that context. Then there's two sides things then is EASA has a project called Data for Safety, where we then, it kind of similarly to what IATA does with its members, is collecting data, looking at how it can use big data technologies to then share information with the industry through that program, and that will evolve, that provide more detailed information and outputs. And then particularly on business aviation, we do a lot of work with the Business Aviation Association, and then particularly feed that into discussions at their annual symposium that usually takes place around November with the business aviation community in Europe to try and look at targeted kind of risks and challenges and that kind of thing. So hopefully that answers those two questions. And then just looking at maybe it's a question from Dave Cross, perhaps Gabriel Dragos can answer. How does that reporting rate, how does that compare with other ground operations activities in terms of where does icing sit in relation to other safety issues in ground handling, I guess, like ground collisions and that kind of thing? Do you have anything on that?
It is a good question. For this specific analysis, we only focused at that. We didn't do a comprehensive ground handling events and where would that sit. But of course, this is a very interesting idea where we can, in fact, develop and expand these studies. Of course, we run incident data exchange. Basically, the participants are, in fact, having access to a lot of data that you cannot find, like the safety report publicly. What you can find publicly is what we call the Safety Issues Hub. Is really very close to the tab where Gabriel has shown you. And over there, we try to post regularly very recent safety events, safety concerns, or safety issues that we believe the industry needs to focus. And we, as you can see there, we're able to reference documents from EASA, from civil aviation authorities, from Airbus and Boeing, just making sure that a recent safety topic, like for instance cold weather operations, which is seasonal, could in fact the user would be able to get information immediately from the major contributors, I would say.
I will add that, of course, sometimes if you look at ground reports in general, this information can get buried by other type of reports that are very common in the ramp. Of course, what we pay attention mostly is ground damage because of the consequences that it can have. But I will say these type of reports are right there as well as low numbers, but high risk for us and something we need to always keep an eye on.
And maybe just to kind of finish that little bit, as part of a follow-on from this, so we have, hopefully you've seen the Conversation Aviation magazine that we've started making. We were going to do a winter ops version for the next one that we release in October. Actually, some of those questions we could perhaps answer by maybe Dragos. I'll chat to you about maybe how we could present data we have and data you have to give that kind of picture in an article for that. So yeah, we'll follow up on that. So thanks for that, Dragos and Gabriel. It was a great introduction. Maybe now we come to Jonathan. You can give a kind of view from your side as an authority perspective of the kind of challenges and risks that you see as you go around your work every day.
Let me see if I can share my screen properly. Hope you can all see that.
Works perfectly, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Sorry, it's giving me a weird one there. Okay, so firstly, thanks to John and Laura for inviting me to speak here today. I wanted to speak briefly about how we as a national competent authority like to see the operators addressing the challenge that present themselves during a readiness process, and then touch on the kind of main elements from our perspective. And I thought those main elements were actually listed very well in the safety map that John showed earlier on when he put up on the screen there. I think it hits the key points. It's a simple but effective map, but I think you'd use it in any readiness project. You really could, or any part of your operation. And from our side, I'd like to concentrate on the, if I can get it working, pardon me, if I can, just on the stay safe part here. So that's the compliance, risks and learning. This is where we probably live as an NCA, where NCA being National Competent Authority, I should just say, just for anybody else who's new to these meetings. And it's where your own compliance and safety departments also apply their focus. So the compliance, risks and learning, we need to make sure we are making these items work for us. That's how we see it as an NCA. They're not standalone items in that they all work together to help your operation run smoothly and safely, but neither are they just the concern of the compliance department or your safety office or us as the National Competent Authority. These things are key operational tools. So I've broken them down just into the three so we can have a look at them, how we look at them, and how I think would be positive for everybody else to look at them. So we look first at compliance. So it states here, encouraging people to do things the right way by following the relevant rules, procedures, and practices. Now, obviously, as I say, this is kind of our day-to-day job as the NCA, and you'll have your internal oversight that you see a lot more than you would see of us. And I'm not going to get into the prescriptive things you should be checking or the checklist you should be doing. You get all that with the DAQCP or your internal oversight. What I'd like to discuss is the process and how it relates to everything we do. So from an operational perspective, as I say, from day to day, we can see that the compliance part as kind of just somebody else's job for checking the operational people. Us guys out in the ramp, that's just somebody who comes in, looks at us for a bit, and then they go. Something we have to suffer. Some people would see it as, and if we've done something wrong, they'll give us a finding and we'll give them a reason why it happened, and then we can all get back to work and everybody's grand. But oversight should confirm compliance as a daily function. We should all be doing it. It's all part of a key operational tool, as well as a safety process. Proper compliance doesn't just make sure that people are doing the job correctly, but it also allows us to interrogate our procedures and make sure that they are still appropriate. Or if something isn't done correctly, a proper root cause analysis as part of your compliance allows you to not just find out about human error, but to check if your procedures are appropriate or even the training is appropriate. It opens the door to the full review of all parts of that de-icing process. And that, of course, leads you on to the risk, the next part of it. Pardon me. So the risks states here, knowing your risks and mitigating them effectively as part of a resilient management system. Now that's a key part, obviously, of what we do in safety. And your headquarter, the bigger operators here, the bigger handling agents, their headquarters SMS will have all the risks identified through the management system and will have mitigated them. But these are from a relatively high level. For a functional and effective SMS, the SMS should be applied locally, where proper safety risk assessments are created and used to identify the differences at your station to this safety critical procedure, that is de-icing. What you need to consider from a local perspective. Once you've done that, you mitigate against those local issues, and I can't really press on that enough. It's the local differences. You'll have your key parts, but then look at your local differences. And it's an iterative process. You need to revisit it, constantly going back. The report should inform it. You get a report in, you should be looking at your risk assessment to see where that sits within it. Compliance findings should inform it. And if they do, then you get a proper and effective risk profile and assessment. And that's the kind of things we as the National Competent Authority would look at. And especially now when you consider the ground handling regulation that's coming in, where SMS is mandated, SMS, it really is the key part of this. That's where you kind of see it being effective and seeing it being used appropriately. And again, as I say, as an operational tool, not just as your safety tool. And one other thing, when you're doing your risk assessments, and it's something I do see all too much, make sure the correct people are in a room. If you're doing a risk assessment on de-icing, get some of the guys out from the ramp who actually do the de-icing in there. There is an absolute font of knowledge out there that you can use to inform these risk assessments appropriately. That brings us on to learning. inspire organizations and teams to talk about safety, and then having a positive approach to learning and solving problems. So learning is really one of the key parts of this, as it brings all those three things together: compliance, risk, and then the learning. It brings it all together. And it does that because one of the key tools needed for that is just culture. And just culture is a tool. You know, sometimes it can be seen from a negative perspective as a way for people to escape blame. But even from a positive perspective, it's seen kind of only as to allow staff to show how they did something wrong without the fear of HR issues or anything like that. But it really is so much more than that. Just culture, for starters, it's your best root cause analysis tool. You know, it's not just about the disciplinary. It's about a means, a place where people can feel comfortable telling the boss, you know, that their procedure is poor or that their views on the safety practices, both positive and negative. But from the root cause analysis side, it's such an important tool to ensuring you're getting the real story, the real problem that's out there. And if you have that kind of view where everybody wants to learn, and that's everybody from the guy in the ramp through to the senior person within that operation, having that just culture there to inform, get the facts, the actual really what's going on out there, and using it to improve your procedures, improve your training, improve your risk assessments, improve your overall management system is absolutely vital. You know, if the manager is willing to listen and learn, then you just end up with all these much better things. You know, learning informs the risk, and it helps to promote easy compliance. It helps to promote procedures which are easy to comply with and safe and ready. And that's really my take on those. We'll just pass back to you there, John, as well.
Wonderful, thanks for that, Jonathan. Hopefully everybody found that really useful to kind of, you know, particularly from an organisational perspective, to see from someone like Jonathan, who's been on, you know, both sides as an operator and also now as an authority, the kind of things they're looking for, and you know, the kind of things you can help prepare for. And obviously, one of the joys is, you know, Jonathan and people like him in the authorities see what happens across all the different organisations. So, you know, has that kind of umbrella view that hopefully gives lots of things that we can learn from in that context. So that's great. So thanks very much for that, Jonathan. We'll come back in the discussion later on, and hopefully there'll be some questions as well. Jerry, if I come to you and ask you to now give us an update on the SAE side of things.
Okay. Not sure, John, what are you seeing on your screen currently?
So yeah, we see the quality assurance checklist work. So I don't know, maybe you need to go back or forward a slide, but so we can see the presentation perfectly. So
Okay.
we're in the right place. It's a good start.
Ah. Hmm.
So is there a different slide you want to start on? I don't know if you can just use the arrow keys to get back to where you want to be. Oh, maybe try it again.
Yep, I think I'll need to now shut it down and try and get it working again. Apologies, everyone, for this.
No worries. Hopefully we'll get there in a second. I think now if you do the slideshow, it should work. Excellent. There we are. Perfect.
Okay. Thanks very much to Don for doing all the hard work in setting out a lot of the detail of making this particular session work. Just a quick run through on global standards update. Global standards were first formulated in 2012. I've been involved with them for the last 7 years, and there was a council composed of SAE, ICAO, and IATA to actually do this work. So it is adopted as across the various organizations. Okay, second slide I have here is really an attempt to try and draw a picture of how the global standards work. Essentially, we are focused on making sure that the aircraft is safe for flight. What I've tried to illustrate with this diagram, which many people have already seen, is how the three main global standards actually fit around the aircraft. You have 6285, which is a methods document, which is the processes for cleaning aircraft. You have AS6286, which is the training in the ability to de-ice aircraft. Around the whole thing is really AS6332, which is trying to guarantee that things work right the first time. So these are the three main documents in green on this diagram. Quality assurance checklist work. Basically, it's trying to back up AS6332 as the quality management, which is based on the ISO 9001-2008 standard. So the idea of the checklist is to say, now that we have the standard 6332, what is the checklist we actually use as part of the global standards? So ISO 9001-2008, 8 various areas are required for conformance to the standard. What we did with the SAE is actually break it down into small subgroups of appropriate experienced SAE people. That way, we were trying to get the most out of people who knew what they were talking about. And that way, we actually got to what people did, as opposed to trying to design a perfect but non-functional standard. The other thing that really we've been working on over the last 12 months or so is talking to DAQCP, and trying to bring in the 25 years of experience from DAQCP to work with the SAE on this particular document for a common compliance approach. As everyone knows, we don't particularly want different approaches to quality and safety. If we can make it global, then people can feel that they are up to standard without feeling that they need to fill in 2 or 3 different checklists. Okay, reason for working together with the DAQCP, their coverage is pretty well worldwide. So in terms of their experience and in terms of their coverage, they have a system that works in terms of auditing. Way forward really is members of the SAE will sit in and support the DAQCP meetings. Members of DAQCP will sit in and support the SAE in document development. The magic document will be an ARP document. It's a recommended practice at this stage because as it's the first time we have created this checklist on a global scale, there will be refinements of this particular document. So instead of an aerospace standard, it will be a recommended practice, first of all, while we go through refining the questions and finding out what works and what doesn't work. The ballot process will start very, very soon. And the expected outcome of all this work is a true global aircraft ground de-icing checklist and the appropriate organization that can actually make sure that it all works properly. The other thing to note is, as with any quality document, the key to this is the refinement of things, i.e. improvement over time. And that's something which will be stressed within the document itself. Okay, so while people have seen the previous global standards picture, this is essentially drawing up the global standards picture and putting in the recommended practice, the global quality auditing checklist, as part of that global picture. So that is a brief run through. Obviously, if there are questions, happy to answer them, but just to give you a flavour of what is going on. Questions or comments?
Fantastic, thanks for that, Jerry. And I think it's really useful to kind of have that extra context for everybody, and for just certainly we'll have another follow-up tomorrow where Jerry's got another presentation for the de-icing session, and we'll also have the DAQCP lead from Etihad join as well. So it'll be, we'll have lots of good follow-up discussions as well. If you've got any questions for Jerry on anything he covered there, please put them in the Q&A and we'll keep monitoring them and probably come back to them as we go through the session. So thanks for that, and we'll start moving on and getting into some of the discussion now and some of the other questions and things that have come up. I'll perhaps just quickly answer. There's a question there, I'll just highlight it here from you about de-icing is clearly a critical safety element for safe departures in wintertime. Why is the EASA not including this in the upcoming ground handling regulation? So thankfully my colleagues Adina and Alberto have helped me answer that. So it's not that it's not that we're not including it in the ground handling regulation. It's that it's only in this first issue that the ground handling of the ground handling regulation, they'll propose minimum requirements for de-icing, while the requirements for regulation 965/2012 on air ops remain valid and applicable. And then the opinion and the things that follow, there'll be some dedicated special time, particularly for discussion on de-icing in the future for next versions of the regulation, and will be a key part of the regulation in the future. It's just it's kind of a staged approach, so it's not in, it's been postponed only. There's no specific publication date for the de-icing part of it, but it will come, and it's something to anticipate, and there'll be more discussion on. So huge thanks to Adina and Alberto for supporting with that and the answer to that. Alex, we'll come to your question perhaps a bit later on, and we'll see how we can come to that one as we go through the discussion. And if any more come in, then that's great. So now we're going to move on to a little bit more of discussion, particularly with Laura from EasyJet, with Christian from Ryanair, and Greg from Menzies, and the other panelists can get involved as well, about some of the challenges. Now, just before I do that, what I am going to do is in the Slido, I'm going to start a little poll, just asking you to use, so it's a word cloud poll, about what you see as your biggest challenge in your operation this winter. And it'll be interesting to see as we go through the discussion what comes up. Look at some of the wording of other people's, because there's nothing worse than getting 30 spellings of the same problem. But if you start kind of adding in your thoughts, and we will come back to that at the end of the session and see what people think about that. So what we're going to start with in terms of the discussion here is looking at seasonal mindset and how does that work, and what do different organizations do? And perhaps Christian, if I come to you first, what I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists to explain how their organization plans their winter operations. So Christian, maybe you can say a few words first about how you do that in Ryanair. Oh,
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Christian, I think. Oh, Christian, we can't hear you. Oh, Christian? Oh.
Oh, no.
Oh dear, we have a slight technical hitch here. I could see Christian talking, and I don't think he can hear us either. So I'm not quite sure what's happening here. While I'm trying to contact Christian, maybe Laura, you can explain about what you do in EasyJet and how that works, and I'll just drop Christian a message quickly. I tried to wave frantically. Hold on a second. Christian.
I don't think it would be a webinar without some technical issues. So
it shows that this is live. We've done lots of planning for this, but give us a second.
We'll try and get hold of it.
Yeah, we'll try and get hold of it. So I'll let Laura talk a little bit while I try and contact Christian. Okay, go.
Yeah, so I guess in terms of EasyJet and how we sort of prepare for the winter operation, it's very much been an evolving picture for us in terms of readiness activities. When I first started in role about 18 months ago, there were readiness activities in place that kind of took a snapshot of how ready we were for a particular time. So if we're looking at the winter operation, we had very good resources to capture how ready we were at the beginning of the season, or how many resources we had at the start of the winter. But what we found is actually that readiness is very much an evolving picture, especially with winter. We don't know when the weather's coming. We don't know actually when we need to be ready. So the readiness kind of activities we do as an airline perspective is something that we've put into kind of business as usual, a continuous monitoring of how we're performing safety-wise, readiness-wise for equipment, people. So we've worked really closely with our de-icing providers, so most of them hopefully are on the call on the webinar today, our airports, to build those relationships so that we can work collaboratively with them to have a look at their training plans, their resourcing plans, recruitment pipelines. It's something that, you know, the information sharing and those relationships that we've built has become really, really useful in terms of gathering information and understanding where our risk stations, our risk areas may be as we go through the winter. And as I said, it's, you know, it's never static. It's never just a snapshot in time. It's always changing from day to day. So it was really important for us to evolve our readiness activities to make it a continual kind of activity rather than something we do in September ahead of the winter.
Fantastic.
Through to Christian.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Christian's jumped off, and hopefully he'll get back on again. So Greg, maybe I come to you next, and you know, explain a bit about how you do things in Menzies and how you organise things, and you know, particularly your role and what you do.
Okay, thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I think similar to EasyJet, and mainly our activities are driven by airlines activities. It is a constantly moving, you know, live document. We review every couple of weeks where we check our progress with the training, with the rig maintenance, which you know, sometimes is a quite an issue due to supply chains issue and spare parts not being available for our de-icing rigs. So we plan around that. I think recently we put more focus on planning in terms of how our customers' volumes compare to our capabilities of de-icing, which is also, you know, I think previously everyone kind of knew what's going to happen. At the moment, we are sitting on the fence, and it might go this way or that way. You know, definitely something what we need to look at and work with our customer airlines, you know, to have a full visibility of what's going to happen. You know, our planning tool, because we use the planning tool, it goes from airport snow plan, airline, you know, GDAM or depends how they use that. We go through our maintenance, our plants and storage maintenance, and I don't believe it ever was seasonal for us. Probably that's why I'm working for Menzies to oversee it throughout the year. You know, my only job is de-icing, and probably that's a positive for our organization, that there is always someone dedicated to look at that, not only you know in August to be ready for September. So that's you know, without revealing too much, which I'm gonna probably share tomorrow in my presentation. I think that's how we deal with the readiness and our preparation for the winter.
Thanks for that, Greg. And we'll I think it's interesting to get these different viewpoints, particularly good to get a viewpoint from a ground handling perspective. We'll keep seeing if we can get Christian back in. So in the meantime, I think let's move on, and maybe Laura, maybe you can talk a bit about some of the key risks and the kind of the biggest risk that you saw last year, and now what you're looking ahead to for this coming season. What are the big things you're kind of facing there?
Yeah, so I think we spoke about this in our podcast that we did together briefly, but I think, you know, everyone can agree since COVID we've had a lot of change of people within this industry, in the aviation industry in general. We've got a lot of new staff members that are coming into the industry, and particularly for the winter operation, you know, it is a very skilled role, to be able to de-ice an aircraft, and it's something that, you know, we've lost some of the experience within the industry that was key. And I think that probably is one of the biggest risks that we see from an airline perspective, and that kind of links with maintaining currency. You know, the winter operation, if I'm thinking about the UK, our winters can be maybe 3-4 days out of the whole winter season. So, you know, whilst we can really try and prepare our colleagues, our new colleagues coming into the industry with training and support and, you know, all the great things that we have in place, I think that being able to maintain currency and experience is a real risk within the winter season. And yeah, I think it's something that we all should be mindful of. You know, just if I'm looking at our safety reports coming in from our colleagues on the ground and the flight, you know, it's something I think during this next season, we need to be very understanding and mindful that it takes time. People are new to this industry, and it can take time to sign off. You know, nothing is quite as good as the actual experience of doing the do during the winter operation. And whilst we have some great simulators and things like that, there's a lot of pressure on these people that are coming in and learning this for the first time. So, and there's obviously lots of other risks that come with that, with being new to an operation that is safety critical and potentially dangerous. So, from my perspective, you know, that's one of the key risks.
And I think it's something we've seen. Like you're saying, it's not something just specific to winter operations. Yeah, we've seen it this summer, particularly with lots of people either coming back into the industry with the kind of finally the peak of traffic or the increase in traffic that we were kind of hoping for last year that didn't really come quite the way we hoped. So yeah, I think that's particularly a big challenge in terms of our people. And maybe while we keep trying to see if we can get Christian back, maybe Greg, you could talk a bit about, you talked about some of the risks and some of the challenges you're facing, but particularly around the people side. What are some of the things that you're starting to do now in terms of, you know, preparing your people to be ready for the winter this year?
So I think John, it's a valid point from Laura here that you know, we've lost a lot very good people. You know, some of the teams, they had 200 years of experience between them. Now they're only probably 2. Some of the teams never de-iced in snow because for them only frost condition was the only weather condition they ever were lucky to de-ice. So that's probably the biggest risk. And Dragos, when he shared his presentation, I think inadequate de-icing was the second on the list. So I presume it's quite high on the agenda. So oversight and lack of experience. You know, during the winter or last winter, some of the teams were only 20 or 30% of experienced people, and by experienced people, we're talking 2 or 3 years de-icing in COVID, where there was no really many movements. So what we do and what we're trying to do is utilize as much technology as we can. We have VR simulators. We trying to use our customer airlines aircrafts to spray water as much as we can, subject to obviously regulation and airport authorities permission. But also, I think it's what is really important that in 628.6 it states that the final sign-off needs to be done on a live aircraft. We can spray water all day long and spray it for many hours. However, if 70% of your teams are inexperienced and they need to be signed off to be, you know, able to spray on their own, and we have a weather event, we can have 60 people sitting around doing nothing because they haven't been signed off. And because de-icing is such a safety critical, and you know, in our organization, Menzies, safety is paramount. We wouldn't allow anyone to start de-icing on their own after just spraying the water. So I think it's important that everyone, airlines and airport authorities and everyone else understands that, as Laura said, it takes time. My message was last year to everyone: bear with us. We're doing what we can. So I think it's good that everyone understands that, and we have a backing from the airlines, but also everyone needs to understand that we need to take time to achieve our goals. So but that's what we do at the moment. I'll share a bit more details tomorrow as well.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Greg. And we got Christian back, which is fantastic. Hopefully you can hear us and we can hear you now. Maybe if I come back to you, maybe you could tell you were telling us a little bit about, and we didn't get to hear you, but you could explain a little bit about how Ryanair prepare, what you do, and then perhaps move then some of the risks that you're facing.
Thank you, and apologies. I hope you hear now, and I hope that it will not die on me again. I suppose that I would just repeat Greg and Laura about the preparation. Since Ryanair, we have the self-handling location and the third-party providers as well. We are kind of, I am kind of wearing two hats at the same time. And while we are making sure that our own team is filled up with people and trained properly, at the same time, we need to make sure that our third-party providers are also up to date and prepared for what is coming. So I'm not sure that I would be saying anything new for you. It's just that in July and August we have already started the trainings. We have already started our safety promotion on the lessons learned last year, and also we will start shortly reviewing the third-party provider readiness.
Fantastic. Thanks. And are there any, when you look back at last Christmas, are there, and look ahead to Christmas, last winter, and then looking ahead to this winter, are there some particular kind of key risks or key challenges that you think you're going to face, and you're starting to already, you said you've already started to prepare for the winter, this coming winter? What are some of the things you're focusing on?
The lessons learned, I would leave it for the tomorrow session. And we will present together with Laura. But what I would say that obviously the human element is the most important. And I would just repeat Jonathan's comment on the psychological safety for the team, because obviously we need to be ready, but they need to be in the right mindset and in the right organization, and the organization should handle them in the right way, with a just culture, of course, with a culture of communication. What I would be interested in, and I'm a little bit concerned about it, is the volatility of the weather. I already saw a couple of comments from weathermen talking about the El Niño effect in the coming winter, which will mean that probably we will have a couple of really, really heavy days around Europe. I suppose that the European colleagues remember 2021, January, February, when we had a couple of really interesting weeks in certain locations. I'm a little bit afraid that it will repeat itself.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly something, from an EASA perspective, we have a dedicated team of experts from across the agency looking at the wider impact of extreme weather events. And I've seen already in the word cloud on with the audience that extreme weather events is probably the second, third biggest thing that's coming up. And I think it's a really interesting one, is how you might be prepared. We as an industry might be prepared for extreme weather events like this. And when large portions of perhaps a particular country or the wider network gets shut down for whatever reason, how we suddenly deal with these kinds of things. I think it's a really interesting thing, that I know, a question that I know, in fact, lots of people are talking about. I see, Greg, maybe you put your hand up there. You want to follow on something there? Oh, you mute.
Yeah. Wasn't quick enough. I think, John, you're right. Especially in nowadays, the W pattern flying, where let's say we fly from Gatwick to somewhere in France, then somewhere else in Europe, then back to Gatwick. If Gatwick is affected, whole Europe is affected, and similar to other airports for many airlines. So I think it's important that we all watch the weather, but also prepare, for the worst and hope for the best at all times. And I think that should be our motto going forward. For the winter or any other event as well.
And I think just again, if I can add, on the topic of sort of extreme weather events, one of the trends that we saw last year was the snow closure of airports. And I think that last year, and it will be the same this year, very much a key message from us is for the airports to sort of really prepare for those heavy snow days. We know that they're going to be tough, but we ideally would like, the runways to carry on. But, it's inevitable that it will happen. It will have snow closures, but there are some things, and I think we'll be hearing about it in webinar 3, where some of our airports have been putting in place sort of new procedures and how they can keep the operation going even on those heavy snow days. And I think that'll be key when the weather does come.
And actually, it's unfortunate we were trying to get hold of somebody, but I was talking to my aerodrome colleagues last week in the preparation for this event, and we had, hopefully we'll see if we can do a webinar on it later on, but a recent IATA meeting, there was an interesting presentation from Avinor in Norway about using automated snow clearance activity. So where you've got challenges, you can't get enough staff, particularly if you've got a remote, some of the remote runways in Norway, where then they have it with autonomous vehicles doing snow clearance that helps do that kind of thing to keep things running. In situations where you might not even be able to get staff to work, and in certain locations, particularly airports perhaps with not very much traffic, those kinds of autonomous things become less of a risk and become possible. Keep some parts of the network open. Could be an interesting one. We see how the technology moves on. So maybe at this point I could also introduce, we've got another panelist joining us, who's one of EasyJet's pilots, George Wilson. George, maybe I could ask you to introduce yourself, and maybe also give from a pilot perspective, what are some of the winter challenges that worry you as you fly around your different activities with EasyJet?
Yeah, hi, I'm George, the safety pilot at Gatwick. It's a really good conversation, actually, because obviously a few things that have popped into my head about what we're thinking from the flight deck point of view going into winter is, I think, tiredness from the summer, because we're all aware of the fatigue levels they get through our flight crews. So mixing a bit of tiredness from just a huge range of pilots, we're looking at over 1,100 just at Gatwick for EasyJet, and then mixing that in with our exposure levels, with over 150 routes from Gatwick, the amount of exposure we get to winter operations is really quite low. Like Laura mentioned, 3 or 4 actual winter days in the south of England is probably the most we'll get exposed to. And then another factor is the experience levels on the flight deck. We're obviously such a big airline now, EasyJet. We've got lots of new cadets coming through, and then on the other side of things, we've got new captains operating with experienced members of the right-hand seat. So mixing exposure and experience off of a heavy summer, it's just the reminders to sort of keep things safe, slow things down, and hope that all the stakeholders in every different department are ready for it.
I think that's what you raised there, particularly about the summer, and we kind of the summer gets extended a little bit, and then before you know it, there's not really time to take a breath. In fact, we talked about this when we did the summer safety week, which was June but seemed like yesterday. We talked about this idea of it being a marathon, but the fact that we couldn't run the marathon as a sprint, and we were talking about the summer, but actually you get to the end of the marathon and then there's barely time to take a breath, and particularly the way particularly some of the extreme weather events come, and we've seen some extreme events in different contexts, not in terms of cold weather, but in different contexts already over the summer, that you almost potentially have the risk of hitting an extreme cold weather event almost having just come off the summer now. So it's, you know, whether it's people on the ramp or people in the airline, you know, doing the planning, or in the flight deck, it's, you know, challenge of how you bring all of that together, I think. So if we kind of maybe move on a little bit in terms of the discussion and look at some of the other topics we were talking about, in terms of, if we focus on the people element specifically, maybe Christian, if I come to you first, in terms of, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you're preparing your people, and then also working with other organizations and suppliers, specifically on the people element and the training, and you know, how you start pulling that together.
Well, we have obviously we have to look at a very specific group, the de-icers in the airport, and I think that there is no other job which is as demanding and as inconvenient for the person. And I think that having this kind of people and retaining this kind of people is the most important. So obviously they are working in extreme weather. They are working not in a good time of the day, so fatigue and stress has a much higher effect on them. We need to make sure that the psychological effects are being dealt with. And like I said, we are preparing early with the training for our self-handling team, and we start the training as early as possible, just to make sure that they have the chance to practice as much as they need and as much as will make them competent in their role. We need to give them time, and we need to make sure that they are confident in their abilities, and they have their practice, they have their communication among the team, because like you said, or Johnny said, we have our people on the ground and they know what they are doing. The other guys know what they are doing, and they need to make sure that the upskilling of the new guys will happen as well.
That's good. Thanks for that insight. And maybe Greg, we come to you next. This is something, you know, it's kind of your bread and butter in your job. You know, how do you do this in terms of preparing the people and you know, the training and all of those kinds of things? What are the key points that you've been working on and starting to get ready for this winter?
So I think initially great news is that we retain significant amount of people from the previous season. So that's definitely positive. That give us a better ability to mix unexperienced and experienced people, which is a key to deliver safe operations. As I mentioned before, we spend every minute, every time we have spare on the simulators, you know, spraying water, making sure that they understand and staff understands what's the key role for them in operations. I think promoting the safety and just culture, which is a key for us as well. But also on many occasions we talk to people. As Christian said, 3 o'clock in the morning in -10 is not a place to be, especially when you are 10 meters up in the air, de-icing the aircraft. So you know, you want to get them or their feelings and understand what they need, and prepare them or give them as much support as we can, not only through the training but also through sharing the experiences with other people. We do have conferences where we send people to meet and share. We have courses, weekly calls to brief people. So that's what we do, you know, in the interim, in preparation for the winter.
And you're saying about having weekly calls. Do you have lots of interaction with people in different locations as much as you can, so they can share challenges and kind of, you know, ideas?
Yes, definitely. And yes, John, because you know, with Menzies network in Europe, we have 18 stations, and the locations from Oslo in Norway all the way to Bucharest in Romania, with the different weather challenges, different weather patterns, and in UK, as George said, well, sometimes we got 2 days of snow in a season, some freezing fog. In Oslo, they only de-icing snow mainly. In Romania, we got mixed bag of frost and freezing fog and some snow. So sharing those experiences helps us to prepare, because even when it comes to training, SAE states that you should train on most common aircraft and the weather condition at your station. So in UK, we prepare people to spray in frost on A320 family. And when it comes to extreme weather condition, all of a sudden we got, I don't know, third of snow on the aircraft, and the guys know it only from theory. So that's where it comes all the experience and oversight of people with experience to help our guys on the ground achieve a clear aircraft concept as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. I've heard so many discussions is the putting the theory into practice. The first day something challenging happens, when you've got aircraft there, you've got to deal with the situation you're facing, and how do you do that and keep the operations running all at the same time. Yeah, Christian, I'll come back to you.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that both Greg and myself, we were talking about the ground crew, but obviously, going back to George's note, we have a lot of new pilots coming into the system, and their upskilling and their communication with the ground crew is also a really important aspect.
Yes, actually, I was going to come and ask George next, maybe from a pilot perspective, how are you in EasyJet preparing your pilot, particularly new pilots, or or people who might not have so much experience of winter ops? I know I've got quite a lot of people I know personally who've flown, particularly in the Middle East, and haven't had perhaps as much exposure as they would have done earlier in their careers, perhaps in Europe, to winter operations. So how are you dealing with some of those challenges?
I think it's really difficult to address this issue because whilst we're looking into winter, we've got to remember that all of the pilots are currently live on the line dealing with the issues with summer. So we're heavily reliant on our training department being able to deliver online technical review quizzes, which we do through our EBT system. And then obviously using the simulated time for our 3-day LPCs to prepare for multiple sort of low visibility procedure days, de-icing days. We've done some mixed evidence-based training exercises in the simulator over the past year, where we ran full de-icing in freezing fog scenarios, just to give a little bit of exposure to the crews, especially in the UK. Because as we've kept mentioning, the amount of time we see freezing fog here is not enough. So I think it's a very hard topic to address, but for now, the training, the online tech quizzes, and the discussions through line training are the only real direct lines of communication we can use.
It's good that there are possibilities, and I think the main thing is exposing as widely as possible the fact that this is something that any organization should be thinking about at least, and there might be challenges, but at least the first step is the understanding it's a challenge and starting to think about it. I see Dragos, you got your hand up there. It's great. We'll come back to you.
Yes, John. Well, coming back, in fact, to the information that we presented at the beginning, you need to take that with the safety 2 approach, because we tend always to look at the things that don't go right, and things that get reported are typically the things that don't go right. We don't count the many things when the operations are in fact going very well, and when in fact the staff on the ground are doing their utmost to solve these issues. The way you could in fact look in your safety information that you have, ASRs, other types of report from your stations, is really the possibilities to improve for the next season. So basically, based on this initial data, well, yes, we received some reports from the crews of things that didn't really go according to plan or didn't go according to the manual. Maybe the manual is wrong, by the way. So it's not always that the fault is down to the guy who's doing the de-icing or to the provider. Sometimes what our expectations are wrong, and sometimes our ways we define documentation are exactly as Jonathan has said. People are written procedures who have never done that operation. So that's what, in fact, I would urge the organizations to do, to use the information that they have in their database in a positive manner. That's really the way that they can talk to their providers and see how together they can, in fact, improve maybe training, maybe clarify certain procedures, maybe clarify what are the expectations concretely on a certain aircraft type, what are, for instance, the areas that the de-icing should be, in fact, happening, the means to do this de-icing, because in a lot of airports, you may expect to have certain services, but really the infrastructure is not allowing this.
Fantastic, thanks. That's a really good point. You got some thumbs up there along the side as well. So thanks for that intervention. It's a really interesting one. I
was just going to add on the whole sort of people getting ready, obviously internally as well. You know, this webinar is aimed at learnings, sharing amongst the community, and I think that's a really big part of also upskilling our pilot community, but also our colleagues in the ICC Centre who have to deal with the day-to-day issues when they come up. What I've been doing, working with my colleagues in flight operations, you know, sharing those specific examples of what's happened and people's experiences, so that actually they can look at real life examples, real life scenarios, and learn from them. So our cross-check magazine that goes out to our flight deck community has been a really great way to sort of share those bits and pieces with our pilots, and also share information from a ground perspective, so you know, we can get the conversation going between ground and flight as well. I think it's been really helpful, and something certainly that we're going to be doing going forward.
Oh, fantastic, thanks for that. And Jerry, I see you've got your hand up there. I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I'd just like to support Dragos and Laura in terms of what they've said. One of the things which we've added into the draft checklist that we've drawn up is for people, for auditors, to write down examples of what they see as best practice, i.e. things which are good, not simply that things are not good. It would be nice to actually take that and share it as best practice. So it's something we built into the audit checklist. So I'm very pleased that Dragos mentioned that. But yes, it's actually included as part of what we're trying to do here. Let's capture the good stuff and not simply concentrate on where things go wrong. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I think this is, I love this kind of discussion, because it's one of the big things that when we started talking about the safety map I showed you before, is that there were lots of discussions about safety 1, safety 2, reactive, proactive. There's some interesting books. Certainly we debate a lot internally and with many friends of mine and many people we work with in safety about then the safety differently movement. And you know, it's interesting, we set up the safety map as much trying to bring all of this kind of together and saying, as everybody was saying there, is safety almost as the capacity to ensure that we have the good outcomes we want, and that, well, what are the things we need to do that, and that it all sits under that umbrella. So I always love these kinds of discussions, but I think it's so important to highlight the positive bits that, you know, we have. You look at the number of movements we have in our industry every day and the number of things that go right in what is otherwise a very complex scenario. You'll see this, you see that in IATA's data, you see it in, you know, you'll see it in our annual safety review that will be published next week, is that given the volume of the European industry, the fact that, you know, we have another year with no European AOC holders with a fatal accident, you know, and you know, you look at where the statistics were 15, 20 years ago, you know, we achieved some amazing things in this industry, and be able to understand how we continue to be as successful, I think is really important. Yeah, it's a great kind of part of that. So we've got 5 minutes left now. We've only got 3 questions, and I'll come to the first one from Alex. And Alex actually says, is there some repository where the lessons learned and all of the best practice and all of these things can be identified, published and accessed? I know there's lots of different resources, and IATA, you have lots of resources. I know other associations do as well, national authorities. So one of the things certainly from our side as well is we're going to collect as much. So what we try and do on our Conversation Aviation magazine, and also then on our community site, is to kind of collect all the different sources, and we'll have a page fairly soon on winter operations that will point to as many different sources as possible, because there are lots of great stuff. We collaborate all over the world. I know certainly Australia and New Zealand are doing lots of amazing things. We collaborate a lot, particularly with Transport Canada and the FAA as well, and then the manufacturers. And I know there's lots of great lessons, and the more we can provide the sources of that and help, so there's certainly those kinds of things. So not necessarily, I think the best repository that's available online is the one that, in terms of data and analysis, is what Gabriel showed from the IATA perspective. And what we'll do is we'll make sure the link to where that is available on, maybe we put a link on the event page for this, so anybody who's here watching now can easily go back and retrieve the link to that site that Gabriel showed. I think that was really good. Maybe Dragos, is there anything else you want to say on the lessons learned and the sharing of that material?
Yes, basically this safety information hub that we are building up, and it's really in there. We will have guidances also from CAAs and other associations. What Gabriel has shown is the interactive safety report, which is accidents, but of course we have much more information than accidents, and to the safety information hub we are aiming to have this comprehensive, and it will never be fully 100% covering all the issues, but we are striving to get as many as possible, and I will send you the link, of course.
Fantastic, thanks. And actually that's one thing. So when we started at the Conversation Aviation magazine, we had a challenge where we were working with a number of airlines who were all keen to share, whether it was best practice or whether it was occurrences and things that they'd seen in their own operation. But it's not so easy to share that with the community from airline A or airline B. So it's one of the reasons in the magazine we created this fake airline called Safe Wings, which effectively and amazingly, they're a low-cost legacy carrier that flies absolutely everything all over the world, regional, global. They have their own handling agent, and they even run an airport. Who'd have thought? But hopefully what that enables is that if anybody has anything they'd like to share with us, that we could publish as a Safe Wings, and we've got a number of airlines, airport and other organizations sharing things that they have in their own safety magazines at company level, that we then basically change to it being a Safe Wings problem, and that our fake airline can then share somebody else's event completely easily. So feel free to share those, and hopefully that will help as well. There's another question from Alex there on, does EASA monitor compliance through NAA operators keeping current with FAA holdover time? We had some exchanges with some of us while we were trying to get that. I don't know, we don't have an answer on that that we could probably share at this stage. I don't think it's something we know enough with enough confidence to be able to share right now, but we'll go away, and I know obviously Alex knows and I know each other, so I'll come back to you, Alex, and we'll see then how we can provide more information back on that one. So I'll take that one away if that's all right. And then we had a question from Rui about Gabriel's presentation about figures related to flight safety and how that links to the ground handling incident and accidents. And we talked I think about that already in the session, in the part of the session where Gabriel was talking. So I think we covered that off, and we'll follow up with Dragos anyway on what data we can share as part of the article and another promotion afterwards, I think, on that one. So that's all the questions that we've got. We've reached our 3:30 finish. So huge thanks to everybody who joined this discussion. You'll see many of the same faces talking in more detail about de-icing and then stow clearance tomorrow. We have some other people joining us from Gatwick, from Paris Charles de Gaulle and Orly and other places as well. So we'll have some more good discussions tomorrow. It was great. I think we all did. I think all the panelists did a great job at hopefully giving you the first look at this problem without then delving too much into the detail on the two more detailed topics tomorrow. So huge thanks to everybody for joining us. Huge thanks to the panelists. Thanks to Laura for joining me here. And we'll see everybody at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning for the de-icing session. If you haven't registered, make sure you do. Fantastic. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Stop.